Hi, everyone. Welcome to another DevSecCon global session. For those of you first time joining us, welcome. DevSecCon is a free, global, vendor-neutral community dedicated to everything DevSecOps related. You might see in the chat that there's a link across to a Slack channel. So if you'd like to ask questions to Simon today, or just in general get involved in the conversation, please join us there. Today we'll be on the live sessions channel. But before we kick off with Simon and before I bring him up, I just wanted to remind you that next month's event is our DevSecCon 24 conference. It's a free global conference. We have APJ, North America, and EMEA sessions going on around the world. And we're about to actually announce our speaker lineup, so please keep an eye on that. Other fun things that are happening during the sessions is all the proceeds from the event will be going to charity, and we'd love for you to nominate who those charities are. Our only I suppose, requirement is that they are technology charities looking to fight diversity and inclusion. And the last thing we'll also be doing is, for those of you stuck at home and thinking how you're going to entertain the little ones while we have the session, we'll be having a separate track with fun entertainment for the kids. So you can plug them into that whilst you watch our keynote sessions. So please join us. If you pop across to devseccon.com, you can find all the details about that or ask some questions on Slack. But I think that's enough from me. Let's bring up Simon. Simon, welcome to DevSecCon Global.
Hello. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and present.
Wonderful. So Simon, you're going to be talking today about building security champion programs. I know that's quite a hot topic. We see it on the podcast, the Secure Developer, as well as in the Slack all the time. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, no, it's been really well talked about, particularly in the podcast actually, and a lot of the areas and tips and best practices and pitfalls that I'll be talking about, some of which have already been mentioned on the podcast, but a lot from other research as well. So yeah, no, looking forward to it. And I love that idea about the looking after the kids when people are on the watching the keynotes. That sounds an amazing idea. I wish I'd have thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, we were thinking about it in-person events is a little bit harder to have, like childcare centers, but there's so many cool things online at the moment. So hopefully your kids like science experiments and a whole bunch of other things. I mean, I'm like half wanting to join that track.
I need something for my dog as well, and then I think I'm covered. Then I think I'm in the clear. But
I'm with you on that. I've got a 4-month-old puppy. He's definitely, thank goodness, sleeping right now.
Excellent.
Cool. Well, that's, I think, enough chit chat. As I just reminded to everyone watching, please join us on the Slack. Link is within YouTube, and I'll also sort of pop it over again, but you can find it at devseccon.com. And if you pop your questions in that during the session, I'll be popping in and out of Simon's session, interrupting him. It'll be fun to give him those questions. So cool. Well, over to you, Simon.
Wonderful, and thank you very much for that, Sammy. And yeah, exactly what Sammy says. This is going to be an interactive session, so please, I would love to hear from you, and I want to hear about your experiences in the chat as well. I have the chat open, and Sammy will absolutely interrupt with a whole ton of your questions and comments as well. So feel free to please give your experiences there. So this session is going to be talking about how you can create, build, run, show success from your security champions programs, and we're going to cover a number of different topics. But before we jump into that, why don't we talk a little bit about my background, where I'm coming from, to give you some context of my previous. I'm very much a developer background. Last 20 years or so of my career, I've been working for around 12 years at IBM doing middleware development in Java and other languages. The last 10 years or so, I've been doing much more developer advocacy focus, and as well as that, I've been doing a whole ton of other things with community. I'm very passionate around community, so creating Java user groups, helping out with DevSecCon where I can as well. Very much miss the in-person meetups and some other stuff there. Right now, I'm the Field CTO at Snyk, and as part of that role, I'm working very closely with our customers and prospects, and I've done a ton of research around security champions programs, how they work, how they fail, how they succeed. And this is really the core of where this session was created. directly from this research and discussing with people who are actually running these. So this is what we're going to talk about today. First of all, what is a security champions program? Why do we want one? Why do we need one? How do people look upon those? Secondly, the structure of a champions program. So how would you create one? How would you put things in place to make it run monthly or whatever that looks like? How you actually roll out and expand that security champion program. So how you roll it out in terms of maybe introducing it to a couple of teams first, and then trying to expand that across your organization. And then a couple of other things: how you actually run that, what you do day to day, what the activities in a security program, and what you as a potential admin or champion need to do to make that work going forward. And then finally, what does it actually look like when we see a good security champions program? How do we know how well we're working? What should the KPIs be? Should we have KPIs? A whole ton of questions about what good effectively looks like. So that's what we're going to be covering today. And again, I'd love to hear your opinions, how your security champions program work. What are the success areas that you're seeing? What are the pitfalls that you fall into? This is absolutely one of the things that we want to do as a part of the community in terms of just, share our experiences. So first of all, what is a security champions program, and why might you want to run one? Maybe this isn't something for you, but the big question is, when you want to suggest a security champions program, it's very important to be able to say what it is and why you need it, because this is an investment of your time, of everyone's time, in fact, development and security. So it's important to be clear about what that is. Typically, from the people that I discuss this with, and that varies from a number of startups, small to medium businesses, a number of very, very large organizations that have not even hundreds, but thousands of security champions as part of it, that have teams of admins running these. I asked this same question to all of those groups, and largely it was a program that was used as a mechanism, an effective mechanism for communication, knowledge sharing, and collaboration between both the security team and the engineering team, the development teams. So this is really one of the core pieces of what DevSecOps tries to break down, which is the silos, and trying to make sure that teams are working as one to a common goal. So this is one of the core areas which security champions can help you to that goal. But it's important to not choose to do a security champions program because you want one and everyone else has got one. But it's important to do one to fix a goal. What is your pain point that you're trying to fix, and how can a security champions programs help you do that? And you are going to have different goals to every other organization out there that runs a security champions program. It's important that when you create a program, it's fixing your goals, not the goals of what other people are doing. So be sure that you're focusing and really being clear about what your security champions program is trying to fix in your org. So how do we know that? How do we know what are the specific challenges to our organization? Well, when we think about a security champions program, it's got security in it, but we need to understand that while some of the goals here are targeting or at least helping the security team maybe get visibility and all those kind of things, we need to understand that we should focus on the pain points of our developers, right? Because a security champion, as we will talk about going forward, the actual role of a security champion is an individual that exists in an engineering team. And one of the things that we need to do is get them on board, get them involved. The only way you can do that is to provide value to them. And the value to a developer there is fixing a developer pain, right? So when we think about what the goals are, why might you want to run one? Think about it from the developer angle. And this is clear for me, obviously, as a developer of 20 years, rather than someone who's grown through the security organization. But for a lot of security teams, they create these programs so focused on getting visibility into the development organizations, they don't think about it from the developer viewpoint. So Prioritize. You obviously have to design the program and run the program from within the security organization, but prioritize your developer goals, prioritize your developer value when you create the program. So how do we do that? Well, do we guess? Do we try and understand? We have to just go out and talk to our development teams, talk to our organizations, ask them, what do you want from the program? Where do you need help? What are you struggling with day to day? Try to work out how, if you could do one thing in their role, where can we add value? Where can we make your lives easier? And how can we help you to achieve the goals that you're trying to solve? Those are the things that need to be fitted into your security program and at the core of your security program, so that it's a reason why those developers will join that program. So let's make a quick distinction here. We've talked a little bit about some of the reasons as to why, how you go about providing some of the goals of your security program and what the security program is there to do. Let's also take a step back and make a distinction between a security champions program and a security community. So a security community is a less structured place for people who are security curious to join, meet up, and exist in a community, like-minded people, birds of a feather style, and talk about stuff, share stuff, chat, share knowledge maybe. By contrast, a security champions program is something that is structured through your organization. It's an approved program, and it's a way of scaling your security best practices throughout your organization to provide secure development through your organization, through your engineering teams. So one is a much more focused, approved, goal-driven program, whereas the other one is a community, just about pulling people who are each security conscious together to learn, to grow themselves, etc. I'd love to hear from those of you who have security champions programs today in the chat. I'd love to hear what your goals are for your security programs. Is there one goal? Is there multiple goals? What was it that for those of you who are creating or created a program, what was it that caused you to say, I want to create a program because of this? And likewise, for those of you who are creating a program, what is the pain point that is causing you to create that program? I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Okay, so next up, why do your teams want a security champions program? And we covered this a little bit in the previous slide, but realistically, different teams are going to have different motivations, and this could actually be different from team to team. You're going to have potentially different development teams, each with different goals, each with different security maturities. Some finding certain things easy, while others, potentially being a little bit slower on security testing, security education, understanding threat modeling, etc. People needing different levels of support and wanting to achieve different things. So one of the core reasons as to why teams do want a security champion is, first of all, to have a focal point. And this is good actually both from a development point of view and a security point of view, but to have a focal point in that development team. And this could be anything from training, education, but ultimately it allows the team to be more self-autonomous. Having that autonomy is really, really important to grow into a mature DevSecOps team. And having a developer inside the engineering team who understands good, secure development practices, who is very well connected into the security team, so that any questions the development, any questions that the security team or development team have to ask, they know who to go to. If they have other routes through to the development team or the security team, that's fine as well. But if they don't, this is a great person to reach out to. Now, that one person doesn't have to necessarily fix all problems, etc., but they will know who to go to pass people on, etc. So that, having a focal point is extremely important. One other really good reason why teams want a security champions program is to really amplify, and this is very much more of a security team pushing this, to amplify that security expertise throughout the organization. And this can come quite easily through when security champions come together and they can be educated as a team, perhaps by the security team or by an external organization, but really being able to amplify that without the security team needing to go into every single group to do that. Some developers might want to be the security champion to improve oneself. Some people who are naturally security curious, and I've seen many people who actually move into a security champions team or program first before making the jump into a security team. In fact, one of our folks from Snyk in our security team today was a previous engineer who was very keen on security, moved into a security champions role, and then from there they moved to being a security engineer. To increase that security influence earlier in the life cycle, right, as well. When you have this siloed experience where security and developers are very much separated, the security team tend to get involved at very specific points of an application lifecycle. And by having an individual who has that focus of security, they are much closer to every part of that lifecycle. And very early on, even during the design phase, when people should be talking about threat modeling, even during a pull request review, when people should be thinking about security code reviews, at every stage, we have an individual in the team with that focus that can identify, that can ask the question or identify issues at the right time as early as possible and start that discussion. They don't need to fix things. They just need to ask that question at the right time. So these are the important pieces. But ultimately, you want teams to want a security champions program because it makes their life easier. And that is something that it doesn't matter if you're a developer or a security person. The security champions program has to make your life easier, has to provide value to you. If you're not doing that, then it's a one-way program that has a likelihood of failing. Okay. Let's start at the start then, or close to the start. When we think about creating a security champion program, what support do we need in order to run a program like this? I talked to a number of organizations that didn't have executive sponsorship, and most of these failed, typically through a number of different reasons. Some because it was extremely hard for the developers to find the time if they're not given the time by the organization. Some where it could be just not seen as a program that is good, essential, has value to the business if it's not officially seen as something that is worth doing. Some whereby if your developers, for example, need to do some security work as an aside or on top of their actual job, people aren't then considering it as part of their job. We need to add this into the developer role in order for it to be. So one of the biggest pitfalls that you can avoid is to run a security champions program without the exec sponsorship, without the support. And this needs to happen not just from the security organization, but the development organization as well. The support comes from the top down, and you need some of the most senior people in the engineering and security organization, whether that's CISOs, whether that's VP, SVP of security, or a VP of engineering, or a CTO. You need these people to voice that this is important. You need these people to push down in through the organization to their second line managers, third line managers, first line managers, whatever level of the organization, down to the scrum masters, the team leads, to say, this is important, you should be spending your time on this, to say, perhaps we are giving you 10%, 20% of your week to spend on these security related matters. Okay, it needs to be prioritized for it to work successfully. At this stage, once you have that backing, it empowers the individuals in those teams, both from the security side, but more importantly from the development organization, to say, I need to spend this amount of time in my sprint or my week doing this security thing. If I ask others in the development team to, do some security testing, to do some threat modeling, to do whatever, it's looked upon as a thing that the business cares about because we have that exec sponsorship. Good question that came up was when you go for the exec sponsorship. Some people did this early on. Some people needed a little bit of time before they got that exec sponsorship, and this tends to come from who is the main reason behind you building up these big security programs. Is it because the execs are saying we need to increase our security? Is it coming one-sided, maybe from the security team? Is it coming from the bottom up, from either the engineers or the security practitioners? Depending on if it's coming from each one of those, you might want to run the program a little bit first, or just go straight to the execs and say, this is what we need. Depending on which way these pressures come from, will determine that for you, for your organizations. And of course, just to reiterate, there are no best practices here where you get a cookie cutter and say, yes, this will work in my organization. It very much depends on the culture, the individuals, the internal politics at play, your modern development practices or security maturity, in order to work out which of these thoughts, ideas, pieces that you want to pull across to your organization or not. So yeah, another way of doing this is to run the program for a little bit, perhaps with a very, very small rollout, and then present that up to an exec team to say, look at what we've achieved. We want to scale this out across more of the organization. Then you start to get the backing there, and then you push that down. It's dangerous to take that too far without that backing, though, because again, you lose a lot of the value without that top-down support. I'd love to hear from you in the chat as well. Is this, have you got executive sponsorship? Was that, if you didn't have executive sponsorship, how much of a hindrance was that to your organization, to your program? That's a core piece that we kicked off with. Okay, so how should we structure the program? And this is something which differs from program to program and org to org. A good security champion is someone who tends to be naturally invested in security, naturally interested in security. But ultimately, a security champion is a day-to-day developer. They are an active contributor into an engineering team or a product team. And typically that you will have one security champion per engineering team, or for a group of teams. Really depending on which one you choose, you could even have a number of security champions per team if you want. But for clarity, it's good to have a single point of contact. If you want to avoid having a bottleneck of just one person, you might want a couple per team, but it's good to have that clarity. The discussion about whether your security champions should be voluntary or whether they should be picked by management, across the board, actually, there were a number of mixed decisions here as to whether people should pick an individual or whether they should be voluntary, or whether you should say, I want one per team, and it's up to your team to pick them. Depends on really how fast the organization wants to create that security champions program, and also how much coverage across their engineering teams they want. But what we found is, for the success of the individual security champions programs, it looked and felt better when individual security champions were completely voluntary in their addition into that program. So why? Because when you get that individual that is security curious, they are putting themselves forward to spend that time. They're putting themselves forward because they have a genuine interest in there. If there is any other reason, whether it's someone we need someone in this team, let's give it to that person, or a team has to pick, they're not always going to pick the best person. Maybe they'll end up picking someone who isn't delivering as much, and that will have less of an impact on their team. For a number of reasons, you can sometimes not get the right group of people, and that can have a negative impact on that community. So ideally, that would be a voluntary position. Love to hear if you have those similar voluntary requirements, or whether there's actually a mandatory requirement for people to have. So yeah, the reason why people do say, you know what, we want one person for every single engineering team, is for that coverage across their organization. And that's an interesting way for a company to be able to get visibility, but it's for the security team to get visibility into the security, the risk overall across their organization. A couple of ways in which, or one way in which this was done fairly successfully with a very large organization, was a mix of the two. And this is where they required every single part of the organization to fill out these security scorecards. So every engineering team had to do that. And the best way of filling out that scorecard is to do it with the security team. So you provide this requirement to have a scorecard so we can understand the security posture of every single team. But if you do it with the security team, and the way to do it with the security team is to have an individual that joins this program, if you do it with that team, then it will actually be a lot easier to be able to fill that out and to work with them in terms of improvement. And so that's a kind of like a way of doing a little bit of both, whereby it's not mandatory, but it will help you a lot. This kind of thing, though, requires the exec team to be able to say, this is something that is very, very important to us from a security point of view. And as a result, we're interested in these scorecards. We're interested in knowing our security posture. So that's the engineering team. What about the security team? Well, from the security team, you also have representation as part of a security mentor or a security coach. From the champions, sometimes security champions are called champions, sometimes they're called mavens. Doesn't really matter, but those are the two that are typically used: champions and coaches. For the security coach on the security team side, the security coach will tend to have a one-to-many relationship with a number of teams in the development organization, and that will typically be the part of the organization that they would have been responsible for even outside of the security champions program. So if they are responsible for, I don't know, certain development teams, certain applications, certain business units, those same business unit teams or organization teams, they would still have that same representation. Now, the role of a security champion isn't just to listen to the security team, understand what needs to be done next, and do it themselves. Sometimes, depending on how the program is structured, sometimes that's how it will turn out. But a lot of the time, it is the security champion's responsibility to make sure that the next thing that they want to achieve in this team, through with the security flavor, obviously, someone gets it done within a time frame. Perhaps they say, I don't know, we want to make sure that every single feature from this day onwards, we do some threat modeling analysis on every single feature. How do we do that? Well, first of all, we need to understand how we structure threat modeling discussions. We need to do some education with the team. Maybe we need a security individual as part of that threat modeling discussion, and we make sure we integrate that with the process. These are the kind of things which a security champion will pull the right people in rather than necessarily do it all themselves. So the most important thing here, however you structure this, is clarity. To be able to say, this is the role, this is what we need you to do, this is how long it should take, and this is how much time you are being provided by your exec team, by your organization to achieve this. To provide that clarity and to make it crystal clear from the organization as what you need to do is one of the most important things that you should be thinking about, so that when the developers see a security champion, they know straight away what it is and what those individuals do. One of the ways in which we can pull security champions together, so this is part of maybe a structure that you might want to consider periodically, could be meetups. You might want to do that monthly on Zoom, bi-weekly on Zoom. Pre-COVID or post-COVID, we'd be looking at maybe doing in-person meetups. So every 6 months, every year, perhaps having a retreat whereby all security champions go and maybe get some education, discuss best practices, talk about security with other champions. Some of these meetups, some of these ways of coming together can also be seen as great recognition as being part of that, being belonging as part of that community as well. One of the key things and one of the reasons why some of these programs fail is because these meetings don't have structure, don't have expectations with them. And so it's important for the security team to be able to facilitate these meetings, facilitate these meetups with clear expectations of what will be happening and what are the important topics to cover. A lot of that can come from feedback from the developers, but it needs to be structured and it needs to be clear about what everyone's getting there. Now, for large organizations, some of the largest ones that I've spoken with, they had teams of admins, not even folks who were actually working on security related issues, but people who were dedicated to the logistics of the security program. This could be scheduling the meetings, doing work for recognition or rewards, doing work for recruitment and pulling the right people, engineers, etc. in. There's a number of different ways in which admins can do that kind of work. Okay, next we talked about rewards and recognition. Let's go a little bit deeper into that because rewards and recognition are certainly important for two reasons, in my opinion. First of all, this is something which we want to make sure, while people aren't doing this in addition to their day job, because it should be a part of their day job. While people aren't doing this in addition, we want to recognize, because these individuals who are going out their way to improve the security of the process are having a real impact in the overall security of services and applications. And so this needs to be recognized as something as a general development hygiene, security hygiene improvement. So rewards and recognition are very, very important here. But this is a community, right? And so we need to reward, we need to encourage people to build that community. Secondly, this is a great way to actually pull others into the community. There are different ways in which rewards and recognition can be given out. I hate to say one is visibility, or what's the other word? Exposure is the other one, right? When people go to conference talks, what am I getting for this? Exposure, wonderful. But this kind of recognition by having call outs by people, whether that's a VP of engineering, and they call this individual out who did an amazing job, who perhaps added some security testing throughout the pipeline, or has reduced some measurements that numbers of vulnerabilities, etc., down to a specific level. Things that are actual results that can be shown. It's really important, and then others in the organization can see that, admire that, and perhaps want to be part of that as well. So what does recognition look like? Well, it depends on the individuals as well. It depends on the cultures, but it could be anything like going to a security conference, DEF CON, Black Hat. It could be internal recognition as well, whether it's bonuses, whether it's being seen by management teams, having call outs at meetings or update meetings, those kind of things, internal company conferences, presenting successes, and also having call outs there. Of course, T-shirts, hoodies, all the usual things which people like to have as part of I'm part of this community, and I got this because of my work. This really helps the belonging and the association of the groups. Okay, what are the actual activities then that we should be looking at in a security champions? What should we be doing? Well, this links very much back directly to the goals, and the goals of the Security Champions programs. We should pick the right activities that fit those goals. For some of the folks that I talked to, education was always very, very high up on the list. The improvement of secure development practices and processes, and And vulnerability management was another very strong issue there as well. Threat modeling, which I guess you can kind of like add into the secure development practices there as well. There are a number of different things you can do. One thing I will absolutely say here is I would suggest being clear and being simple with picking one or two things to start off with, maybe even just one to start off with, and just saying, this is a security champions program, and all we're doing is we're here to educate, or all we're doing is we're here to improve secure development. Be simple and grow over time. If we start with education, the typical ways in which we have seen and contrasted an excellent job on this. There's a really good session that was given at a conference. I can share the link out later, but it was given by Comcast about how they created this belt system for education, and depending on how much time you spent on education, or how much time you spent working with the internal teams and spending on your internal processes, that enabled you to jump up the belt system. And it provides you with the ability to know how many black belts, brown belts, green belts, blue belts, whatever the color you need or should have in some of your key teams. So for example, for your highest risk, most sensitive areas of your applications and services, you need to know that those teams have an acceptable level of security knowledge to reduce that risk. And so you might say, for these teams, we want a black belt in every team, or we need a brown belt in every team, to make sure that the people who are in those teams, you have the best people in the highest risk areas. Another great way of having a KPI or expectation, being able to show success, is to show the growth, or to show the trend in which people are going up that belt system. But there needs to be some reward as well. Sometimes people see the gamification almost of being that next belt as their reward. You need to also be clear that just because one team has 2 brown belts and a black belt, and your team only has like a couple of orange belts, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to get to that level. They might need that security depth because of the application that they're working on, and you don't necessarily need that all throughout the organization. You need to be very clear about which levels you need for each area of the org. Improving security development. Secure development is a journey, really, that takes time. And it starts off with visibility. So having that visibility in what your organizations are doing throughout their SDLC. And this, one of the best ways that I've seen this work is with a scorecard. Some people mandate the scorecard throughout the organization, and you basically work with the security team to work through that. Others, security scorecard is one of the first things that you will do when you join the Security Champions program. And it's a great way to get that visibility into what is working, what isn't working, what you are doing, what you're not doing. This is also, if not done correctly, can also look a little bit like a witch hunt in terms of the security team asking lots of questions, the development team getting a little bit defensive in saying, no, we're not doing that, no, we're not doing that. And there's almost like a level of guilt there. So it's a really good thing to do, to let the development teams own those kind of scorecards and come to the security team for the support, for the understanding where needed. So have the development team run the security scorecards. Effectively, a self-assessment is a good way to avoid any conflict there. And that gives the security team visibility, but it also provides the security team to ask the development team, okay, what do you want to fix next? Give the development team that empowerment to say, what, we're going to own our own security programs. What should we work on next? And have the security champion say, well, actually, these are the areas that I feel our team can jump on board quicker. Maybe it's adding some security testing into Git repos. Maybe it's doing some threat modeling. Maybe it's just plain education that people care about. It very much depends on the team and the goals of the development team as well. But this is also a good route to be able to say, add your tasks of what the development team want to achieve. The development team can talk about that together, and then the security team can help the development team reach those goals. So yeah, to summarize, having a developer-led, developer-owned approach whereby the security coach supports that champion. The champion sometimes does a lot of that work, but can give that out to the team as well. That's the model which we've seen most successfully work. The premise here is that the coach and the list of security champions have shared KPIs. The success in the security coach is the cumulative successes of each of those champions. If the champions are having success, then the coach is being successful in rolling changes and rolling that visibility through in the program. Let's jump on to vulnerability management. This is another area which we found was very hot topic in terms of getting people to see the flow. So I think there are a number of ways in which this can be looked at. And again, visibility is one of those key areas whereby you can grab a tool, run some tests, get the list of vulnerabilities, but understanding what that means, getting context behind that, understanding what is high risk, what is not high risk. A lot of the time, this needs to be a conversation. Sometimes this development team can kind of like work on that and within guide rails make decisions. Other times you need that flow of information, that flow of discussion, that understanding of what triaging should look like. And this is absolutely something whereby this slick communication and collaboration between the security team, the development team, through these security champions and security coaches can be invaluable, because things can happen a lot faster with these flows. I would say the last thing around this is pulling in actually threat modeling is one of the other areas which came up time and time again in discussions, whereby the development team are realistically the only team that understand the true architecture flows, the flows of their application and their services, what is being used every day in production and what isn't. The security team are the team that knows the real depth, the real risk and the risk management of pure security issues. Merging those two together and having those groups be present through threat modeling, through design, is obviously the best way of doing threat modeling. And having a champions program to pull those people in, this could be one of the great goals of a security champions program. Okay, so how do we roll it out? Well, I guess there's a number of ways in which you can choose the initial set of champions that you want, but the initial set should be small. You should pick just a few teams that you want to start with. You want to give them the same coach. You want to have you want to pick teams that are potentially maybe the most important services or applications, highest risk, because those are the ones we want to look at first. So higher priority areas of your applications. We want to think maybe closer to teams that are already mature in whether it's development processes, DevOps, security. Let's talk to people who are very capable of adapting to change, who want to change. So you're not going to see a lot of those conflicts, right? We don't want to tackle all problems at once. We want to try and work out how we can get a working security champions program first, and then cross all of the other issues as we get bigger. And also the security team, individuals in that team will already know where they have great relationships with individual developers. Maybe talk to those developers first and see if they want to be part of that program. So there's a combination of those which will create you that first initial group of people. So one of the areas is, if you can, try and get a common denominator of goals. So what we're saying there is, if you have 3-4 different security champions and each of them are trying to take on different aspects of security, it's a lot easier if you have a common goal or a couple of common goals, that you can even pair people together and have them talk to each other about what they're doing, about what they're trying, what works, what doesn't work. Keep the risk low initially. So once you've got that and you've got the resources, you've got the backing of the exec team, obviously the backing of the management team to do that, that's when you need to start thinking clearly about the actual things that you want to achieve, and then start putting out a roadmap of maybe 1, 2 quarters, 3 quarters. This is something that's a long road. This isn't something that you can just like turn around in a couple of weeks before thinking about how we grow it again. This is something which needs to grow organically and slowly. So the big question, of course, is, well, how do we know when to roll it out further? How do we know when to grow it? And I think it's very easy to be able to grow it without thinking back about, do we have the right number of people in the security team to be able to fulfill this? Because we don't want just to grow the security team, grow the engineering number of engineering security champions into this, but not have the right the backing to support that. So make sure you absolutely have that. Also, make sure you're seeing success within those teams as well. Okay, so what does success look like then? How do we know when to roll out? Because when are we seeing success? Well, as I mentioned just now, it's a really imperative that we don't expect incredible, amazing things within days or weeks of or even months. You know, this is a slow process. It needs to be a long road. It needs to be this is a strategy that we want to employ. We need to grow this organically, and as a result, we're not going to, have amazing results straight away. And if we do, let's celebrate them, but let's not expect them. So what do we actually want to measure? Well, from a new security champions program, let's talk to individuals and ask them, is it clear? Is it, do you know what you're getting from it? Let's talk to them and see, let's even just see how many people are wanting to come into the program. How well is it being adopted? How well is it being adopted within the engineering teams as well? It's important for each champion's participation to be voluntary, but how well are their suggestions and their recommendations going through the development team? Is it having an effect at that low level? So signs of adoption could be an important metric. Signs of growth of the group over time, if it is organic. The retention of champions and how active champions are. Are champions going to the bi-weeklies? Are champions filling out their scorecards? Are champions putting a plan together? Are champions meeting their own goals for those plans? So the engagement of members is something that's fairly easy to track, and also shows whether that relationship is effective. It's a harder one and not necessarily something that you want to do, but if you are saying you want to spend 20% of your time in doing security tasks, you might say, if you are tracking time in those kind of ways, you could say, is this developer, spending 20% of their sprint time in doing security work or not? You don't necessarily want to introduce that if you're not doing that today. There are pros and cons in using those kind of approaches anyway. So not something that I would say, if you're not doing it today, I wouldn't necessarily recommend jumping to it. So another big success is the improvements that the dev team are working on, and this comes back a lot to success stories. So in a quarter or in a couple of quarters, what are the big changes that have happened? And be very anecdotal here, particularly with the initial rollout. Be very anecdotal that since this date we've always done threat modeling. Since this date we've managed to reduce our backlog. Since this date we've added automated testing of whatever throughout our pipeline. Okay, so be very anecdotal, be very specific about the improvements that are happening. Share those as success stories. Try and encourage other teams to follow in that success, and roll out beyond the Security Champions program as well by saying, hey, this is what this team are doing. And you'll find other individuals maybe trying to do that in their teams. And that is where you look at those individuals and say, oh, excellent, you are a potential future champion that we might want to roll in to the program. when we next look at growing. How many people are doing their scorecards is another great one. How much visibility, how much additional visibility do development teams, do security teams have in the organization? A very, very strong success as well. A couple of things that I will mention here is that be very careful with numbers, of course, because you need to understand what is a good metric and what isn't a good metric. Just because you see huge numbers of vulnerabilities on one side, none over here, that could just mean that they have excellent visibility into their number of issues, whereas this team have no idea how many issues there are. They're not testing as much. So be very careful about numbers without context. But where you can show trends over time. So, while the number of commits, for example, in this repository has stayed constant, we're seeing the number of overall backlog vulnerabilities be reduced because we're reducing the number intentionally over the last however many sprints. Be very specific about why numbers are changing as well. Okay, and yeah, the success, like I say, the success of this needs to be shared between the champion and the security coach. Another level of success is if you're doing things in education, how many people have you got in the right belts? How much improvement is happening over time? How many people are actually invested in that as well? How many times have you celebrated your accomplishments? How many times have you been able to showcase individuals or had call outs to different people by VPs, etc.? This is one of the great ways in which success can be seen. Success is also one of the hardest things to actually show. So anecdotal evidence is extremely important, and being able to celebrate those successes through rewards and recognition is equally important. So yeah, I'll finish there, and I'll kind of just say what I said at the start, which was one security champions program can't just be lifted and shifted and dropped down onto another organization. It's very important that the security program that you add into your organization, if you want to add one, is very clear, has well-defined goals, is understood exactly what those goals are by the engineering organization as well as others in the teams, and that is run over time as a long-term thing, and grown organically. These are some of the ways in which I feel the most successful organizations are running security champions programs today. So with that, I'll pass back over to Sam and see if there's any questions or any comments on any of that.
Wow, that was an awesome session. I definitely learned a lot. Thank you so much, Simon.
No worries.
And we've had some really interesting, actually, discussions on the chat around how other people are structured, and a bit of a conversation happening around. I'd be curious to know if you've seen this from your findings, is that, obviously when you have a security instance in production, you have bug bounty programs and things like that. And if any sort of security champion compensation on finding that flaw before it goes into production, almost like you saved the company X amount of money in bug bounty, so you get this reward. Like, have you seen any of that happen?
No, I haven't seen anything quite like that in terms of like effectively pulling that bug bounty amount through. One thing though that was discussed, and actually this kind of like does tie back into measurements, is how do you prove that you have reduced the amount of vulnerabilities potentially through some of your early actions? So it's a great point in terms of, let's say you do a threat modeling session. How do you know how many vulnerabilities you are reducing there? You're not taking stuff off the backlog. You're actually reducing the number that you're introducing in. So being able to explain your process changes and things like that are just as good as those. But I've not seen people kind of like shift bug bounty monies or anything like that. But that sounds like an interesting case. Yeah,
there definitely is a conversation happening around it in the Slack. So if anyone is listening and has seen it or done it or has opinions on it, please jump in. I'm sure everyone would love to know your opinions. And then sort of most conversations around that difference between sort of voluntold. I've never heard that word before, but voluntold route versus the volunteering route of security programs, and just sort of the difference in orgs. That conversation happening as well on the chat at the moment. But all in all, really, really great session. Thanks so much, Simon.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Cool. Well, again, for anyone listening, if you enjoyed today's session or want to hear more from Simon, he is part of our Slack community. So if you're watching this post us going live, please jump on there and he can answer any of your questions or get involved in the conversation. A reminder that DevSecCon 24 is happening next month on the 23rd and 24th of June. So please grab your tickets. And we'll be sending a few sort of care packages to anyone from one organization. 5 or more people sign up to like do a watch party. We'll do the beer and pizzas and things like that we're missing from in-person events. So if you get your team along to DevSecCon, we'll ping you and we'll get that set up. So hopefully we'll see you there and we can try and mimic the face-to-face events that we've been missing. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.